We continue in the fifth letter, understanding creation, that God creates the worlds with two letters. Excuse me. Wait, don't worry, I don't have a cold or anything else. I don't know what that was. Nothing. The spiritual world from the letter Yud, and this physical world from the letter Hey. We went at great length so far to learn about the letter Yud. We also discussed the letter Hey. And what's the difference between the two? Well, ultimately, God speaks the world into creation. And in speech, there's two components. There is the articulating speech. And to do that, you need to be very distinctive, one letter from another letter, one word from another word. Otherwise, it's going to be babble talk, like a little baby who's also talking, but doesn't have the development of speech, and therefore they have no distinction between letters to create. As we went into great length explaining actually the whole concept of speech, and even we learned a little about speech therapy as a result, and how it's not intelligence, but it's a developmental process. As a little child can understand everything, but yet sometimes they can't communicate and speak their mind. And it creates great frustration as a result. So we have the form of speech, the 22 letters that we form different letters to make words that gives an understanding to what we communicate. But also in speech we have the breath of speech. And that's the matter of speech. That breath is kind of equal in every, as a baby babbles and as I'm talking, hopefully not babbling, and there's a breath. That breath brings it the articulation that is verbalized. Because I can articulate, I just articulated, right? But it wasn't verbalized because there was no breath involved in the word. So to bring it, that it will really come down and really be heard by another outside of me, that's the breath that allows us. But for the metaphor, that's the breath of, that's the external aspect, to externalize it, to verbalize it, that it comes out, that you can hear what I have to say. Then there's the internal part, which is the deeper, more difficult part, and that's the form of speech. Again, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and which in every language, there's the form. So the spiritual worlds are created with the form of God's divine name, the letter Yud. So we explained at great length, it refers to Chachma, which is the source of articulating letters and words, the primordial wisdom, right? And this world that we all know and love is created through the letter Hey. Now, again, the Hey is the matter of speech. It's the external aspect. And being that it is the external aspect, what that means is it creates something that is much more, just as speech, there's the, form versus matter. Form is more abstract. I'm not, abstract's the right word. Not abstract is more, it is. Matter is, more physical. So creating this physical world is that letter Hey, which is the breath of speech. When you say a letter Hey, it's only breath in a word. So creating it. Now, in that breath, though, says the Alter Rebbe, is found form. And in that form is found divine emotion and divine wisdom and the divine will and the essence of God. However, it's there in a concealed way. So in the breath itself, for example, like the baby that has a breath and babbles, right? So in the metaphor over here, the breath hides the form. It hides the emotion that brings forth, the desire to, or the need to communicate, right? Because why do you communicate? Because there's an emotional attachment that you have to another, that you want to communicate something to them. And that's what compels you to speak, because you have something you want to share with another. Otherwise, if you were just living just living your world in between your two temples and what's in your head, you don't need to communicate. You can just think. But the fact that we speak is because we want to communicate to another. We want to connect to another, and that is what's compelling us to do that is emotions that we have. So in this speech is found the emotion enclosed in it. And that emotion is actually also found in it wisdom and intelligence, because it's our perspective, the way we perceive things with our intelligence, that then shapes our emotion. And that intelligence is further compelled by a will that we want. Not even we feel, but we want something that compels a perspective, that compels an emotion, that compels a thought about that emotion, and finally to communicate that. So, and of course, this is all a metaphor to appreciate and understand that the very person themselves is in that breath that is being communicated. But in the breath, when if you were, as like in the metaphor of the baby, right? You only hear there's only the breath of their speech, because they're not able to articulate an aleph from a base, or an A different than a B, right? An A, I had to move my lips like this, and for a B, I had to move my lips and my mouth in a different way. All that is there in the breath, but when the baby babbles, there's only the breath. It conceals everything else. It hides everything. You don't see any wisdom in it. You don't see any emotions. And that's exactly what's in this world. Is God here? Very much so. He creates this world, but it's from the breath of God. Not from which is external, which is the materiality, so to speak, of speech versus the form, the spiritual inwardness of speech. So the inwardness of speech that creates spiritual worlds, that they have more of a sense of God's presence, because it's not as hidden. The presence of God in the form of speech. Just like in me speaking now, in the form of speech that I have, that I can articulate, I hope, in a clarity, what do you perceive in that articulation, in that communication, in that speech, in that word? The form of it allows you to have a sense that there's something emotional, which is a strong feeling for the words that I'm conveying, the love for it of Tanya and its teachings. And hopefully in what I'm conveying, that there is wisdom. And that wisdom is there's a desire to know and to understand and to share. And in all of that is me, myself and I, the core of me there. So that could be somewhat um, through the form of speech something that you perceive. So the angels that are created from the form of speech, they somewhat get where that speech is coming from, God. And therefore they're perceiving God's presence. That's why they're more spiritual and they're closer to that radiation of the light of God that is coming through his form of speech. But when it comes to the breath of speech, it's much more, it's lost. The breath of speech, it's really hard to disassociate one from the other because I have to have form of speech and the breath to have it verbalized what I am saying. Otherwise, if I don't have both things together, there's no communication. That's why I use the metaphor. The Alter Rebbe doesn't use this metaphor, but I'm using the metaphor to the babble of the baby, right? Well, the baby's talking or speaking, especially if it's a 2-year-old baby, that 2-year-old toddler that hasn't developed speech. What haven't they developed? The breath is there of speech because they babble and they can grunt a few, let's say a few words or syllables, but they haven't developed the form. That's much more refined power that needs the further development of the child. So in that babble, though, there's breath. From that breath, you don't sense any emotion, any wisdom, any much of a person there, right? And I'm just using that as a metaphor to appreciate that with the letter Hey, that God creates the physical world, there isn't much of a sense of presence of God who's uttering that word, because we are sort of only attuned to the breath. And even though, yes, the form and the emotion, the thought and the emotion and the wisdom and God himself is vested in there, but in a way that is completely concealed. And hence in this world, God is very much concealed, and yet here at the same time. I hope we expressed that well. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? That's today's class. I thank everybody who came and joined us last night for TRC. I enjoyed it very much. Hope everybody else did as much as I did. Vida, how does this relate to Moshe who stuttered? So stuttering is not about the breath. Stuttering is about being able to have so it's a developmental issue. There's a developmental issue that, and it could, and the truth is, there's different issues about why someone would stutter. It can be a trauma, and Moshe had a trauma when he was young in Pharaoh's court that led to it. So usually it's some kind of trauma. Story with the fire and the gold. So that creates that and hinders the development of one's capacity to pronounce letters and words appropriately. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, good question. Any other questions, comments? Rambam is coming up in a few moments. All right. Marcy, Norm, Meryl, Eliana. Anybody to share something with us?
Rabbi?
Yes.
So when the Alter Rebbe is specifically talking about the Hebrew words and how important it is, does this apply like to any speech and any language?
Yes. Yeah, it's all speech, it's all language. That's why I said A B C A B before, right? A, you have to move your mouth in a certain way. B is different than an A, and a C, right? C is more your teeth are involved. B is more your mouth. A, I don't know what that would be more. Not exactly certain. And others say, the five organs are that you use to enunciate to various letters, right? The lips, the teeth, the tongue, the palate, and the larynx are in all languages that are necessary in order that we can actually communicate appropriately. So it's just so B with your lips is like pay in Hebrew, also with your lips, right? That
Yeah, he's just specifically talking about the Hebrew letters and
well,
relation
because
to
we're talking
creation.
about Hebrew letters because it's the Hebrew letters that God creates the world. Yeah,
Right.
A, B, C, D, E, and so on are arbitrary letters. The shape are arbitrary. An A comes before B is arbitrary, but not in the Hebrew language, because in the Hebrew language it is a holy language that God speaks the world into being. So it's those very letters are the vital force, the divine energy that brings a world from nothingness into something. So specifically we're talking about that. But when it comes to the concept of language, it's in all languages. Is the
So
same idea.
is there something special about the articulation of the Hebrew language for the Jewish people in prayer or in
Well,
Torah
yeah.
study?
Well, as a result, if it's God's language that He creates the world with, so of course, the letters, the shape of the letters, the meaning of the letters are all endowed with a holiness to it, and therefore, of course, using them and praying with them, or understanding them and their usage will be a divine one as opposed to just a human communication. Exactly. Yes. Very good. Um,
It just seems really intimate and beautiful to learn that the language and its meaning that way.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very powerful. Very powerful. Okay, I don't see any other questions. We will continue our conversation. So we're going to finish this oh, audio.
Hey, Rabbi, I put the questions in the chat box, but I wrote, why doesn't Chabad promote Tanya more? Do you see similarities between Tanya and other religious psychological teachings or documents, and why do people reject Tanya?
Well, if you're speaking to me about promoting Tanya, I think I do a lot of that. I can't speak for others because we have a daily class over here. Um, so, and other religious psychological teachings. So, Well, definitely you'll find similarities, and you'll find, relationships between other teachings for sure. I think you'll find some very fascinating, unique ideas that are here that you won't find elsewhere. And often we do express that. Um, why people would reject it? It's a very good question. So there are people, thank you for bringing that up, reject Tanya, and I would suggest it is because they haven't learned it appropriately. If they would embrace it, as everybody that comes here, embraces it. So part of the reason that they um, reject is because, see, if you were to define Judaism in one word, um, I would maybe say it's tradition, a Masorah. The tradition means it's something that's handed down from generation to generation. So we follow because, this is what our parents, 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 and parents, parents, all the way back to, uh, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, right? The matriarchs and the patriarchs. So, yet at the same time, there's something about Torah that is ever evolving. So there's a story with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was in Vienna in a hotel lobby, and some Yekish Jews came to and asked him, Rebbe, what's this with, with these teachings of Hasidic teachings of the Tanya and other Hasidic teachings? This is not what we had in our history for all of these generations. It's something new. Why? So he asked him, do you see the beautiful artwork on the top of the ceiling? And they said, yes. I'm wondering why he's asking that. Then he took a lamp and he put a lamp on the artwork and says, do you see it better now? I said, of course. Well, that's exactly what Tanya is doing. It's taking the artwork of God, the Creator, and the Torah teachings that were given at Sinai, Talmud teachings and oral Torah that was also given at Sinai, and it's bringing an illumination, a new light, to expose that which is already there in a new light, in a much more profound way. So a lot of people reject that because it's new, and being traditional means not embracing new. That's the basic idea and the basic problem that a lot of people have. Thank you for that question. Okay, very good question. All right, folks. I hope that helps to clarify a bit. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for.
All right, thank you very much. All right, folks. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich in Kadesh, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful, great day. God bless.